It is a fundamental perception in the Eastern tradition that this world in which we live and move is not a product of chance or a finished creation. It is an emanation, a manifestation from the divine being, and it is out of delight, bliss of the divine that this universe has come into being. By bliss it is sustained, and into bliss it departs. The old text asks, who could live or even breathe for a moment if there were not this ether of bliss around? Citing this declaration, Sri Aurobindo asks in his Life Divine, his main metaphysical work, then why is bliss not a characteristic of our life? Why is it that pain, suffering, stress, struggle, these are the features of our life? And he answers, it is because we have lost the art of life. We do not know how to live, and we do not know how to live because we are ignorant. And this ignorance which besets us is not merely absence of mental knowledge, but it is a many-sided ignorance. Analyzing the manifold character of this ignorance, he discusses how our mind itself, around which the modern science of psychology has been built, is only a fragment, a fraction of the real mental consciousness. The mind with which we see things, experience, think, know, is only the surface mind. We are not aware that our mind has many stadia, many levels of mentality. This is what is called the psychological ignorance. The primitive man functions at the level of the senses. His 10 senses, the motor senses, the perceptive senses, they always go outward, light upon their objects, bring back reports, and the sense mind acts upon them. We have thus the sense mind, the physical mind, which is concerned only with the physical realm of experience. It is only as man evolves that he develops a sense of discrimination. He gets a doubt whether all that the senses report is true or mistaken. And the reasoning mind, the logical mind, develops the faculty of discrimination forms, and he begins to examine what the sense mind receives and decides. Still, the reasoning mind is attached to objective facts. It is only some who develop further and have what is called the thinking mind, the mind that thinks for its own sake, not always decided by physical objectivity, but thoughts, ideas, concepts, it thinks about, moves in those realms, and we have the thinking mind. And there are other levels of the mind to which we are not yet open, which are not yet organized in our being. But we behave as if the little fragment of mind, the mind of the intellect, the mind of logic, were all. Beyond the thinking mind, there is the level of what is called the higher mind, where you think not one thing at a time, but in a large way, in a comprehensive way, thinking in masses. Beyond the thinking mind, the higher mind, is what is called the illumined mind, where knowledge comes in the form of illumination. Beyond that illumined mind is the intuitive mind, where knowledge comes in flashes. When you want to know a thing, you have the answer. And this intuition, which is an edge of the ray of truth, is active not only in the mind, but even in the body, even in the heart, even in our life energies. At the submental level, we call this intuition instinct. But above the level of the mind, we call it intuition. It is a direct perception of truth without going through the labored process of logical ratiocination, deduction or induction. And intuition is threefold. There is what is called truth audition. You hear the truth. There are many poets who hear hundreds and hundreds of lines which they don't understand at the time they hear the word. They begin to understand by the mind only afterwards. This is truth audition. There is revelation. They see the truth. They see things as they are going to happen, or the truth as it unfolds itself. That is truth revelation. Truth seeing, truth hearing, and there is what is called truth discrimination. There is a spontaneous discrimination between truth and falsehood, the right and the wrong. One doesn't reason, one doesn't argue, but there is a spontaneous separation between the truth and the untruth. This is another operation of intuition. Above the intuitive mind, there is what is called the overmind, the cosmic mind, which holds the entire universe in its grasp, which sees the justification of every truth. It sees the justifying basis of every approach, every philosophy, every ideology. For in that status of cosmic consciousness, the inspiring basis of every form and every movement is self-revealed. And above this cosmic mind, there is what is called the truth mind, called the gnosis by the ancient Greek thinkers, the supermind by Sri Aurobindo, which is the direct possession of truth. Our mind seeks for truth, struggles for truth, but the supermind, the truth mind, is in possession of truth. And it is not only knowledge, but it is a will to effectuate the truth. At our level, we know certain things are true, but we don't have the effectuating capacity, the will to translate that knowledge into practice. Or we may have will, but we don't have that illumining wisdom to guide that will. But at the level of truth mind, knowledge and will are two sides of the same coin. Thus there are gradations of mind, gradations of the mental consciousness, and we are still in the kindergarten of mind. And we think that we have the secret of the mind. Psychology, if it is a science of the mind at all, I don't admit that, but granting that it is a science of the mind, is still in its infant stages. That is as far as this mind is concerned. But the psychological ignorance is not the only ignorance of which we are prisoners. There is the constitutional ignorance. Or before I come to the constitutional ignorance, I would like to put the egoistic ignorance. Each one of us has an ego, a point of concentration, centration, which is normally mistaken for one's personality. So much so that when an Eastern seer asks to cancel, to give up your ego, many Western seekers are confounded. How can we give up our individuality? But the ego does not constitute the true individuality of man. The ego is a point of centration, a focusing point developed by nature down the course of evolution, right from the beginnings, in this world of flux, in this world of movement, so that each form may have one point to relate every movement, and that at the human level is called the ego point, the ego. But at the human level, this point of focalizing movements becomes a kind of a prison. It promotes the sense of I, mine, my interests, my family, my people. The implication is that what is not I is other, foreign to me. So the ego becomes a barrier, a divisive force, and keeps me apart and separate from everybody else. It leads to what is called separative ignorance. I, looking upon myself as the center, and the whole universe being there to serve and promote my interests. Everything that happens, I relate to my interests, my position, and I don't judge things, appreciate things in their own value own significance. The ego becomes preponderant, prejudicious, and blinds my vision. So whatever goes counter, or I feel goes counter to my supposed interests, I say it is wrong and I fight it. This leads to a narrowing of a person. Sri Aurobindo says, ego was the helper, ego is the bar. When man awakes to the necessity of going beyond himself, the ego becomes a barrier. So this egoistic ignorance has to be transcended. The third type of ignorance is the constitutional ignorance. What I am conscious of is only my surface personality. The surface complex of the external mind, the visible body, and that flow of life energy of which I am conscious. It is a most external surface. I am unaware of 9/10 of my being. If I interiorize myself, plunge into my own being through meditation, through contemplation, or whatever discipline, I become aware that my mental consciousness, my surface emotional consciousness is only a fringe. Behind is the larger mind, a larger heart, a larger life energy, and a subtler body consciousness. Even this body is not just skin and bones and blood, but pervading it, there is a consciousness, there is an awareness, and all this inner being behind the surface is called the subliminal being, consisting of the subtle body, the inner life being, the inner emotional being, and the inner mind. The subliminal consciousness. Consciousness is the awareness of the being. So wherever there is consciousness, there is being, and wherever there is being, its faculty of awareness is consciousness. And this is not all. This, around the subliminal, there is what is called the circumconscient being. The consciousness in the universe, the atmosphere around us, consisting of the thoughts and feelings of many around, not all of whom are living, but each one who has lived and thought has left a deposit in the universal atmosphere. People who write, people who read, people who think, they emanate so many thought vibrations, and all of them sail around. And each individual's actions and reactions are governed, influenced by this circumconscient atmosphere, what we call the circumconscient being in the universe. And not only that, we have an awareness, a level, what we call the waking state, the waking consciousness. But there is a level of which we are not fully aware. Many things that come to us that we think half, they sink down into a level, what we call the subconscious, of which we are only half conscious. And when we sleep, when we are not fully awake, these subconscious thoughts and movements come up into a kind of chaotic medley. and we have dream experiences of a kind. And this is not all. Below if the subconscious represents a belt of half awareness, below is the element of what is called the unconsciousness, of which we are totally unaware. But it goes on absorbing suggestions, ideas, feelings of those around us, known and unknown to us. And the unconscious is a layer which comes up most unexpectedly, when we don't expect it, and upsets our apple cart. Below, the lowest level of the unconscious is what is called the inconscient, where practically there is no consciousness of any kind, neither withheld, neither suppressed, neither half nor quarter, but no consciousness. It looks as if there is none. That is called the level of inconscience or nescience. Absolutely no reaction. And the most rigid atoms, the matter, has a layer which is absolutely inarticulate, and that is the inconscient. And just as there are these levels of consciousness, subconscious, unconscious, inconscious, below, above the mind, the highest ranges of the mind of which we can be aware, there are levels of the superconscious. Those realms which open up when we silence the mind, when we hold the mind quiet, gather all the thought energies, at that time we begin to become aware of a wideness, of a coolness, of a calm, which belong to superconscient realms. And these, the levels of the superconscient consciousness, being, are what I have described to you, the various levels of the higher mind, the illumined mind, and so on. This is the second type of ignorance. And the third type, first the psychological ignorance, the egoistic ignorance, the constitutional ignorance, and then there is the cosmic ignorance. We behave as if this little physical world were all. But this physical world is only a front. It is a result of a continuous interchange and interaction of various other planes of existence, other worlds organized on those planes. In our texts, the Upanishads, there is an interesting passage which speaks that behind the physical self is the self of life force. Behind the self of the life force is the self of the mind. Behind the mind self there is the self of knowledge. And behind the knowledge self there is the bliss self. So each one of us has 5 sheaths, 5 bodies, and corresponding to these individual bodies, individual states of being, states of consciousness, there are universal planes of existence. There is, if you take this small circle as the physical universe, surrounding it, looming over it, is the world of life energies, where there is free movement of life energies, no rigidity of matter, and around and overtopping the life world, the plane of life, there is the mind world, the world of mental energies. Above that is what is called the world of light, the world of plenary consciousness. And above that is the world of bliss. Above is the world of consciousness. And above that is the world of existence. So this universe, according to all spiritual and occult traditions, verifiable even today, if only you will care to take the steps for verification, the yogic steps, is a septuple world, a world of 7 planes of existence. And the lowest, what is called the foundation of the cosmic edifice, is the physical universe. I wouldn't go into the occult description of what is below the physical. That is another theme. But for our purpose, to give us an idea of how small and insignificant is this physical universe, which we think to be everything and all. It is only a concretization, a congealment of the spirit from those heights. But this earth, Mother Earth, is central to this cosmic scheme, because evolution of consciousness takes place only on earth, because the soul principle, the psychic principle, is embedded only on in earth and in man, who is the product of earth. All the other planes of existence are typal worlds, where there is no movement, no progression, no evolution. But they all interact and help the manifestation of the spirit on this earth, the physical plane, of which the earth is the crucial and significant center. This is as far as the cosmic ignorance, and there is the temporal ignorance. We think that this little life of say 60 years, 70 years and 100 years is all that we have. But if we accept the truth of evolution of consciousness, evolution of person, evolution of the soul, 100 years is hardly adequate to register one single radical step. There has been an immense past behind me and an immense future before me. The present life is a juncture, a transition between the past and the future. And our human time is only a moment in the unrolling of what is eternal. There is an eternity which is unrolling itself in this duration of our creation, and that is time. There is an infinity which has no bounds, absolutely unbounded. That's the divine, that's the God, that's God. And that limits itself for purposes of manifestation, and that becomes space. The time and space of the physical plane is not the time and space of the dream state, not the time and space of the mental state. Everywhere they differ. That is why many prophecies of many clairvoyants, they don't come true, because they confuse the time and the space on the subtler planes with the time and space on physical space. Because when the clairvoyance faculty operates, this distinction between the different levels of existence doesn't easily exist for those who see. One has to develop that inner sense of perception to make this distinction. And apart from this temporal ignorance that there is an eternity, and there is in each one of us a layer, a level of being where when we withdraw by spiritual practices, we can become aware of the eternal moment, when time comes to a standstill and you feel unconcerned with life or death. You stand aloof at the level of the immutable self, what we call Atman in Sanskrit, the self which is the same in all. The self, individual I and the universal I are one. At that level, there is no movement of time. There is oneness. Past, present and future lie mapped out in a straight line. There is no limitation of space. One feels one with the cosmos. It can be realized in our lifetime by each one, if only we take the necessary pains therefore. And this eternity of time is something that man misses, and he goes round and round in the moment of time, which is a fleeting second. And he worries about death. He thinks this is the end, forgetting that death is only a process of life. Death is only a door for greater life. Once the soul finds that this physical body cannot be of further use for me to gain more experience, to grow more towards God, it decides to drop it. And once that central decision is taken, either death, either sickness, accident, or whatever physical reason, physical outer reason occurs, and the person leaves. And he leaves not to a place of extinction. He does not go nowhere, but he goes to a larger world where he is helped, sustained, and directed to assimilate the experiences of the past lives, choose his own life experience for the next incarnation, and he comes back. And thus through a cycle of births and births, he grows. If there were no death, there would be no growth. Where there is ignorance, where there is limitation, death is inevitable. Because there is always a gulf in ignorance between the demands of the soul, the need of the soul, and the capacity of the body. All illnesses of the human individual, illnesses of earth, like volcanoes, like earthquakes, calamities, they too are signs from a spiritual point of view of a certain imbalance, disequilibrium between the earth being and what the creatures of earth do with it. The need of the earth to grow, earth consciousness to grow, and the failure of the inhabitants of the earth to support this need and enliven that growth in themselves, that leads to this disequilibrium. This has been the perception of occultists. And whatever outer reasons and explanations we may give, the central truth is this: there is an evolution of consciousness in man and in earth, earth being and individual being. And if we grow, we respond to the demands of the time spirit, which is to constantly deepen ourselves, enlarge ourselves, elevate our consciousness. The earth will be spared many of the calamities with which it is beset at present, and so is the individual. Many of our diseases, many of our tensions, many of our neuroses would be obviated if only we could observe ourselves, go into certain deeper levels of our being, open to the cosmic calm and silence, to the working of peace, and direct that peace, whether from the mind or from the heart, on ourselves, on those parts in our body which are sick, which are weak, if you can direct that force of peace, fill that life energy with peace, instead of excitement, instead of fear, instead of agitation, the illnesses would not be there. My teacher, the mother, used to say that illnesses are a falsehood of the body. If the body were to function normally, according to the laws of health, according to the laws of living, the body would not be sick. We are ignorant of it. We are driving ourselves on false basis, filling the body with wrong food, unhealthy food, don't digest properly. We have no knowledge of nutrition. We medicate ourselves overmuch. Don't give the poor body a chance to live and to grow. This is another type of ignorance. And all these types of ignorances result in what is called a practical ignorance. In everything that we act and react, we react wrongly. We are overwhelmed by circumstances, by conditions around us, and we hardly react in the manner we should. We react in a hurry. Somebody said, we don't respond, but we react. Respond means a certain responsible reply, to think what is the right thing to do. How many of us have the time or the willingness to hold for a while, assess the situation, and then give the response? So this is a kind of sixfold or sevenfold ignorance. And to meet it, we have to revise our notions of our consciousness, of our being, enlarge our knowledge of time, of our own mind, of the universe, eliminate the ego, and take steps to tackle this problem of ignorance at every level of our being, individual and cosmic. And integral psychology just means this, that there is one consciousness pervading the whole universe, macrocosm. The same consciousness, one, is organized in an individual scheme, the microcosm. And you can't cure, tackle, deal with one part, leaving out the other parts. Everything is related. Man is a multiple being. He is not a unitary being. What he thinks, it is the end product of a process. The whole of him is involved behind. And for man to progress, for us to decide in what way we are to progress, in what way we are to fulfill our minds ourselves, we need to have a knowledge of the integral man, the physical man, the vital man, the emotional man, the mental man, and the spiritual man. All these are interrelated, and a total perfection of man, a whole-sided perfection, health, calls for an integral psychology. And psychology here does not mean just a science of the mind. It is a science of the psyche. Psyche originally meant the soul and not the mind. And the soul is the central concentration of consciousness, which holds our physical being, the vital being, the emotional being, and the mental being together from behind. So it is ultimately the science of the soul. And the soul cannot be divorced from the rest of the being. So the time has come when they speak of holistic sciences, holistic approach. total perfection, total progress. And that presupposes a development of integral psychology. Integral psychology is not a new concept for the yogic mind. In the East, they have yogic disciplines to open up the different levels of one's being, relate the individual to the cosmic being, relate the individual to the transcendent and to the universal. So all these dimensions fall in their perspective and come into operation. So yoga, a whole-sided yoga, an integral yoga, aiming at the total perfection of man, presupposes an integral psychology. Consciousness is organized at different levels of the being, within the individual and within the cosmos, relating them to each other, putting them in rapport with each other. And the very concept of psychology has got to change. And indeed there are signs of this frontier of psychology in the West expanding. Today we speak more of parapsychology than psychology. And we'll have to speak tomorrow of metapsychology and ultimately the integral psychology. I have done, and I would invite questions from members who have gathered here.
Excuse me, Mr. Pandit. Before we have our questions and answers, I would please allow me to make a couple of short announcements.
I was wondering if you could relate Jung's concept of the collective unconscious, which I'm starting to understand a little bit to I guess I have the feeling that we've got a division. We've got the ego, then we've got everything sort of underneath and everything up here. But I'm having a hard time, relating the unconscious in terms of a Western psychology to what you're calling superconscious and everything. I don't know if they in fact are connected, or if it's just terminology we're dealing with, or if you have something totally different.
I do think Jung means different things by the collective unconscious than what yogic psychology means by the unconscious or the collective. The same words are used, but in with different connotations. And I am not that conversant with Jungian psychology that I could answer these questions. Yes?
I missed the point I'd like to catch. You mentioned that many clairvoyant predictions that do not come true due to, that's what I missed right in there.
Due to confusion between the different planes of existence. May I develop the point a little? Before events can happen on the physical plane, they are taking place on the subtle, physical and still higher planes. Various forces, good and bad, divine and anti, they all clash to bring about certain possibilities. And it is only after things are firm there that they are precipitated here on the physical plane. But on that level, various possibilities look like actualizing themselves immediately. And some of these people who prophesy dire dooms and whole cataclysms and the end of the world and all that, they really see things likely to happen on the subtler planes, and they confuse the physical plane. But actually There it is a kind of a battlefield where the various subtle forces struggle for supremacy, and some things are determined which are precipitated here. So whether it is Nostradamus, IKSC, and there are other prophets, so many have not come true, simply for the reason that what they visualized is there. It was not determined for happening here. So this confusion of planes of existence has led to many prophecies, predictions going wrong. Yes?
When you see something that's going to happen and you'd like to negate that, what process is possible for you?
The question is, when you see something going to happen and you want to prevent it, what do? Many times what we see going to happen is either an intelligent anticipation or a subtle vision, seeing something about to be precipitated, and a chance is given to will, the human will, to intervene. It is a law of this creation that the stronger the will, the more powerful the will, the more chance it has of influencing and changing the course of destiny to a great extent. Concentrate. But what is most effective is faith in the divine, faith in a supreme existence, a God. And Sri Aurobindo has a line in his epic Savitri. He says, a prayer, a king idea, a master act can link man's strength to a transcendent force. That is, one can pray and move the divine will to intercede and to change the course of events. One has to link oneself through sincere prayer and evocation with the supreme will. Yes?
Do you feel that your 7 levels of consciousness relate to the 7 chakras in the
Yes.
body? And if so,
Yeah.
would you discuss them? Would you discuss the 7 chakras in your psychology?
I presume that you are all familiar with the 7 centers of consciousness, centers of energy corresponding to the consciousness, called the chakras, the wheels. Actually, there are no wheels or lotuses. They are visualizations of the occult sight, of the configuration of the nerve conduits called the nadis in Sanskrit in the subtle body of the human being, not in the physical body. Well, the lowest center of consciousness at the base of the spine, it governs the physical universe, the physical principle. The center below the navel governs the lower life energies consisting of little desires, passions, sex, food, greed for food, and so on. The center at the navel governs the larger life, large ambitions, courage, nobility, chivalry, all mighty movements proceed from there. Then the heart center, the center at the heart level is the center of love. And love is the soul of bliss. Where there is love, there is bliss. So that is related to the world of bliss, love center. And the center in the throat center, it governs expression, energy, power of expression, what is called Chit Shakti. And then the center here governs the willpower, vision, consciousness. And the center above the crown of the head, it is not in the head but above the crown of the head, opens to the higher levels of consciousness, the worlds of Sat, that is existence, which are beyond normal human reach. So each center is related to a plane of existence, and by opening that, activizing that, one can get into communion with that plane of existence. Yes?
I wonder if you could expand a little more on something you touched on, which was you were saying that we are all in this evolutionary process.
Yes.
I wanted to know why we have to go through this. I mean, why is it, what you know, if there's an almighty or supreme being that's already there, why are we going through the process? Or is it the fact that somehow that almighty being is also going through this process with us?
I would be taking it up tomorrow as part of the treatment of planetary consciousness. Yes?
At present, where in the United States are people most advanced with yours? Is there an academic study of integral psychology? Where we consider the best center in the United States now?
I have come across number of individuals during my tours from New York to San Francisco and back in number of places, but I have not come across any organized center where the study of integral psychology or integral living is being pursued in a systematic way. It is still a desideratum, and I do hope that interest generated in the subject by such meetings will lead to some constructive effort at understanding and applying the principles of integral psychology. So far, I have not found any either in America or in England, though there are some nucleus in Germany. Yes?
What would you consider good textbooks to begin with for a group that was interested in such a study?
There is a book called The Yoga Aphorisms on Yoga by an Indian seer who lived 3000 years ago, called Patanjali. And number of people have written interpretations, translated them, and the Theosophical Society has published quite a good number of them, these aphorisms on yoga. So also the Vedanta Center has brought out certain treatises by senior monks on the Yoga Sutras. That is one. And Sri Aurobindo's Life Divine and Synthesis of Yoga. These are two major books which discuss the whole subject in great depth. Yes?
In answering another question, you were referring to divine forces and anti-forces that are in conflict, as we all know or hear about. But I'm wondering, what is the origin of these anti-forces, especially on subtler planes? So we could say here on Earth, probably ignorance, but what on subtler planes also? Or how does that come about?
The cosmic and the universal ignorance does not end with the physical world. It extends beyond. Till the truth level is reached, the whole thing is a belt where the shadow of ignorance falls. It is a law of creation, God's creation, utter freedom. Freedom to each individual, each person, each force to work out in its own way. And just as among us humans, there are some who rebel, who revolt and take the wrong path, the path of deviation from truth, so also in the subtler worlds there are denizens and beings who rebel against the central will of God and want to carve out their own empires. They are the titans, they are the devils and their host. This is not a myth, not a superstition, but a living fact. Yes?
You mentioned about healing, well-being, nutrition.
Yes.
Who actually, in a person that's diseased, how do they actually become healed? Is it a supreme being? Is it the healer? Is it the person himself? Or is it a combination of both?
There is a healing force in nature, a force which is active to heal. Some are born with a gift to channel that force. They are called natural healers. But many of us have got that capacity to heal ourselves and heal others, but we are not aware of it. But a real healer can know from the look of another whether that person has got that capacity, but they don't normally tell because they want to keep that thing to themselves. But if we can open to nature and make a conscious effort to let that force flow through us, well, it does act. It flows through the fingers, it flows through the eyes, it flows through the breath, and even by thinking of you, it is possible for me to send the healing vibrations to you without seeing you physically. So there is a reservoir of healing energy in nature. Some persons are gifted, some persons cultivate that capacity to canalize that healing force. Third is, if you have faith, that contributes a good deal. That creates a receptive ground. And of course, there is the supreme sanction of God, and that is always there. And by prayer, one can invoke that strength and that supporting yes to the action of the healing force, healing energies. And I am very gratified to see that in America, more and more people are believing in healing, and many training centers are developing in Northwest particularly, and in California. It was only day before yesterday that we happened to meet in Summit, where I had been there. I gave a talk at the community center. In Summit, there is a place called Summit, I don't know whether it is a town or a village. And there we met a man called Robert with a beautiful beard, an angelic face. The moment I saw him, I knew he was a man of God. And later I learned that he is a leader of the social advancement, and he is conducting a healing center. And the history was that that man had cancer of the pancreas, and the doctors gave him 6 months. And they did some small operation and took out some portion, but the main disease was not touched. But then by meditation and by self-healing, he has cured himself. And now he is trying to share that gift of God with others, and he has opened a healing center.
Thank you.
Yes?
Is that in Summit where he is?
Yes. It is, this Corvallis, there is a city like...
Yes, I know where Summit is.
It is there. He is there now. He is about 45 years old, with an unusually flourishing white beard and white hair. Yes?
Could you briefly discuss planetary future?
Planetary?
Yes, planet future.
I think that we will do tomorrow, is part of this theme.
Well, I think that will conclude this evening's program. Let me remind you again that we'll meet again here tomorrow at the same time. Anybody that wishes to be on our mailing list, please sign the address at the back of the room. And